A bunch of young boys were walking home from school when armed soldiers appeared from nowhere. The children fearfully scattered apart, with one running into an orchard, not knowing what lay ahead. A man in plain clothes grabbed him, tied his hands, blindfolded him, and dragged him away. The terrified 12-year-old tried to twist free, but his weak attempts were met with kicks, punches, and rifle butts. His captors forced him into a vehicle and drove him to a detention facility. There they accused him of throwing stones. They proceeded to interrogate him without his parents or a lawyer present. And after a few hours, they forced him into another vehicle and took him to a military base. They then proceeded to interrogate him in ways that traumatized him for life, in ways that would traumatize most adults. This type of incident is commonplace in Israel and occupied Palestine. In fact, Israel is the only country in the world that tries children in a military system. Military. Unlike Israeli children living in Israel and the children of illegal Israeli settlers living in illegal settlements in occupied Palestine, who are all subject to a civil legal framework. Under Israeli military law, Palestinian children reach the age of criminal liability at 12 years old. This subjects them to arrest, harsh interrogations, and months, even years of imprisonment. Though law aside, Israeli authorities still detain and interrogate Palestinian children as young as 5. Some are snatched off the street or from their parents in broad daylight, but most are dragged out of their beds, what should be the safest place on earth for any child, between midnight and 5 a.m. by armed soldiers in terrifying nighttime raids under the cover of darkness. Rarely are their panicked parents told why or where their children are being taken or for how long. During transfers, children are blindfolded, hand-tied, and subjected to physical and verbal abuse. They face painful restraints, prolonged exposure to the elements, and they are deprived of food, water, toilets, and medical care. When the interrogations begin, the captors tie the children to chairs. They then threaten them with death, physical violence, or sexual assault, not just against them, but also against their family members. The goal is a confession, and having broken down, children usually sign Hebrew confessions, even though it's a language they can't read. The Israeli authorities then use these confessions to prosecute the children. They never inform the children of their rights, nor do they offer legal counsel. In fact, the trial is often the first time the children will meet their lawyers. The only evidence against these children is usually their confessions, or those confessions of other children obtained under similar duress, and bail is usually denied. Israeli military courts have the authority to hold Palestinian children for up to 90 days before a court hearing, and this includes solitary confinement. Children aged 12 to 13 can face up to 6 months in prison. Children aged 14 to 15 can face up to a year, unless the crime carries a maximum penalty of 5 years or more. The maximum penalty for throwing stones, the most common charge, is 10 years. Children above 15 are treated as adults, with the maximum penalty for throwing stones being 20 years. And I should probably mention that the age considered an adult for Israelis is 18. And as mentioned earlier, they are not subject to these military laws or punishments anyway. Most of these Palestinian children plead guilty, as it's the quickest path to freedom and avoiding pre-trial detentions. They then serve time in these grim Israeli prisons alongside political prisoners and hardened criminals. They then receive few or no visits, even from their family members, due to the severe travel and permit restrictions Israeli authorities impose on Palestinians. The experience leaves children with post-traumatic stress. They go on to live with continuous nightmares, sleepwalking, and bedwetting, and of course broken educations that lead to further lifelong consequences, as well as severe depression and anger. On average, Israeli authorities arrest 2 Palestinian children per day, the highest rate of child arrests in the world. Since the year 2000, over 8,000 children have been arrested and prosecuted. 8,000. And of course, if we were to go back even further, the number is much larger. Now, all of this is based on various reports, including a UNICEF report from 2013 on this subject stating, and I'll quote, that the ill treatment of Palestinian children who come in contact with the military detention system appears to be widespread, systematic, and institutionalized, end quote. Any reasonable person familiar with this injustice comes to recognize it as part of Israel's process of breaking a society through its children. Last week, the first ever Palestinian human rights bill was introduced to US Congress. The bill, HR 4391, is titled The Promoting of Human Rights by Ending Israeli Military Detention of Palestinian Children Act, and it was introduced by Representative Betty McCollum with a number of co-sponsors. It prohibits US tax dollars from supporting human rights violations against Palestinian children during the course of Israeli military detention. Now, whether this bill becomes law or not, or that it only touches on only one element of Israel's human rights violations of Palestinians, it is certainly a step in the right direction and must be supported as much as possible. If you're an American citizen, make sure you strongly and clearly let your representative know that you want them to support Bill HR 4391. If you are not an American citizen, make sure you thank and support Representative Betty McCollum and her co-sponsors on social media. Another thing you can do is to support DCIP, Defense Children International Palestine, who were involved in drafting the bill, will continue to work on pushing it and work tirelessly to support these children in military detention with legal support, reports, and advocacy. You could support them monthly with what it would cost you to buy, say, I don't know, a pizza once a month. From my end, in support of Bill HR 4391 and in solidarity with the children who are taken, we will be releasing our next short film, Today They Took My Son, that addresses Palestinian children in military detention. It will be released 15 days from now on Human Rights Day, December 10th. Please sign up to be notified of the free online release at www.oceansofinjustice.com/Today They Took My Son, so you can watch it and share it. And the last option you have, of course, is to do nothing.